He sat tall on his horse, a young man with piercing blue eyes and a face that looked more sorrowful than savage. Around him, the Missouri wind carried the coppery scent of blood, blending with the smoke that still clung to the air. Jesse James didn't smile. He didn't need to. The bodies of over 100 Union soldiers lay strewn across the battlefield, and beside him, Bloody Bill Anderson, part soldier, part monster, nodded in grim satisfaction. Cheers echoed through the trees. The men were wild with victory, waving scalps like flags, slicing ears and noses, claiming trophies not for glory but for vengeance. One of them shrieked into the sky, a scream of madness or pride. It was hard to tell anymore. Jesse James wiped his bloodied knife on his trousers and watched the carnage unfold with a chilling calm. This was not just another raid. This was a message. He believed the war had made him. But the truth is, it broke him long before the first gunshot ever rang out. Jesse Woodson James was born in 1847 into a world already bracing for war. His father, a preacher who owned slaves, died chasing gold in California, leaving Jesse's mother to hold the family together. She remarried and rebuilt their life with a new husband and 7 slaves working their tobacco plantation. They weren't the elite, but they had enough, and they believed in their right to keep it. As tensions rose in Missouri, the James family didn't just support slavery, they defended it. When the Kansas-Missouri border erupted into war, they aligned with the so-called border ruffians, men who crossed state lines to attack abolitionist towns. Jesse was a boy then, but the violence was already close. By the time the Civil War officially broke out, Union soldiers had occupied their land and the countryside descended into chaos. Then came the night Union troops raided the James home. His stepfather was nearly hanged to death. His mother was dragged away. Jesse himself was whipped, just 16, lashed like an animal in front of his family. That night his mother whispered through clenched teeth, "They will pay for this." Jesse never forgot. Soon after, Jesse and his brother Frank joined the Bushwhackers, a group of Confederate guerrillas who answered to no flag, only to rage. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like phantoms. They killed without mercy, mutilated without hesitation, and vanished before sunrise. They became nightmares with names. In September 1864, Jesse and his gang slaughtered 24 unarmed Union soldiers, returning home from the war. Later that same day, they ambushed a much larger force and cut them down like wheat in a field. Those who begged for their lives were shot where they lay. No quarter, no remorse. Jesse James wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something else. When the war ended in 1865, the country began to heal, but Jesse didn't. He returned home wounded both in body and in spirit. The world he knew was gone. Laws passed by Republican victors barred ex-Confederates from voting, preaching, or serving on juries. Families were driven from their land. Houses burned. The South had lost the war, but Jesse James had not surrendered. He married his cousin Z and tried to build a life, but resentment grew like a rot in his soul. In 1866, Jesse joined a daring raid on a Republican-owned bank in Liberty, Missouri. It was the first daylight bank robbery in American history. The message was loud and clear. Jesse James wasn't done fighting. Over the years, Jesse and Frank formed a gang, aligning with other Confederate outlaws like the Younger Brothers. They became infamous for robbing banks, stagecoaches, and eventually trains. In many robberies, they left passengers alone, only stealing from safes and banks. To some, it looked like justice. To others, it was terrorism. Jesse's image split the nation. A Kansas City newspaper editor, John Newman Edwards, helped craft the legend. He painted Jesse not as a murderer, but as a Southern Robin Hood. Stories began to spread. Stories that Jesse stole from the rich and gave to the poor. That he was a man of honor. That he never killed unless he had to. None of it was true. The railroad companies, tired of being robbed blind, hired the Pinkertons, elite detectives led by Allan Pinkerton, the man who once protected Abraham Lincoln. Pinkerton sent agents to Missouri. One by one they vanished, killed, tortured, left for the hogs. In retaliation, the Pinkertons bombed Jesse's family home. The blast killed his young half-brother and blew his mother's arm off. Jesse and Frank were nowhere near the house that night, but the message was received. This was no longer about justice. This was war. Still, the law didn't stop. In 1876, a bank job in Northfield, Minnesota went terribly wrong. Locals fought back. Gunfire erupted. Members of the gang were shot, captured, or killed. Only Jesse and Frank made it out alive. The legend was dying. They went into hiding, farming in Tennessee. Frank seemed content to fade away, but Jesse itched. He couldn't let go. He built a new gang and returned to robbing trains. But time was running out. Enemies were closing in. Jesse grew paranoid, unsure who to trust. In 1882, he invited two new gang members into his home, Charlie and Robert Ford. He told himself they were loyal. He was wrong. Robert Ford had made a deal with the governor, freedom and $5,000 in exchange for Jesse's life. On the morning of April 3rd, Jesse stood in his living room, dusting a picture frame. He laid his guns on a nearby chair, something he almost never did. Ford watched him quietly. And then, as Jesse reached up, Robert stepped forward and shot him behind the ear. Jesse James collapsed, dead in an instant. He was 34. The news traveled fast. Crowds swarmed to see the body of the legendary outlaw. Ford was arrested, convicted, and pardoned within a single day. He spent the rest of his life trying to profit off the murder. It didn't end well. Years later, he was shot dead with a double-barrel shotgun by a man who simply said, "Hello, Bob." Jesse's mother began charging people to visit the grave. She sold pebbles from the site. When they ran out, she collected more from the stream nearby. Jesse James became a business, a brand. His son, Jesse James Jr., tried to escape the shadow. He was falsely accused of robbery, but eventually cleared his name. He moved to California, became a lawyer, and even played his father in a silent film. In the movie, Jesse James was a hero. But the truth is less romantic. Jesse James was a man forged in war, driven by vengeance and lost in the myth he helped create. He wasn't a Robin Hood. He didn't give to the poor. He didn't spare the innocent. He was a legend, but legends lie. And yet, even now, his story still echoes like gunfire across the pages of American history. So what do you think? Was Jesse James a rebel hero, or just another outlaw lost in his own darkness? Let us know in the comments, and if you think this story was wild, wait until you hear what happened to Australia's most notorious outlaw, Ned Kelly.